Hello and welcome back to the channel. So in this video I'll be sharing how to make a shift dress with ruffles, and if you want to see how I achieve this beautiful dress, you want to keep on watching up to the end and you do not want to miss a thing. Okay, so let's get right into the project and sewing. So these are the items that I'll be using for this project. I have my main fabric, which is Ankara, of course. I've got ruler, I've got my scissors, my chalk. I've got this plain pink fabric, which I'll be using to make the ruffles and the neckline of the front. I also have lining fabric, my measuring tape, and roll of pattern paper. So these are all the items that I'll be using for this project. Okay, to begin, I'll be starting out from the back. We'll be making out the back plan first. So what I did was to take my body lines, my armhole, my waist, my hip, and the length, which is how long I want the dress to be. I want it to be about 38 inches long, and that is what I have marked out. So from that center back fold, I'm going to measure a neckline that is 3 inches wide and 1 inch deep before I create the armhole and slant the shoulder. So I did take a quarter of my body measurement on the sides, but this is going to be a shift dress, so we do not want it to be tight. So I'm going to add 2 inches to the bust, 2 inches to the waist, 2 inches to the hip, and all the way to the bottom. So basically what that is going to do is to give room for ease and to also give room for seam allowance. Okay, so from the 2 inches, half inch would be for seam and 1.5 inches would be for ease. So I'm just going to add the 2 inches on all sides from top to bottom, and I will show you guys what it looks like. So this is it once it is added, 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches, and I connected it back into the armhole, or I connected the armhole into the 2-inch extension just so it curves nicer. And this is what our back plan is looking like, nothing too serious. So what I'm going to do next is, from that my neckline, I'm going to create a vent for the back neckline, because we won't be installing a zipper in this garment, so we need the garment to have enough room to pass through the head. So you can see what I'm doing right now. From that neckline or neck depth, I am just going to mark about 3 inches into the center back, and I'm just going to trace at the edge, or on the edge rather, a very thin line about 0.5 centimeters from that 3-inch point that we just marked back into the neckline, and that would serve as the vent for the back, basically, just so we have enough room when we try to wear the garment. And what I'm doing right now is just cutting out all the pieces. I'm going to cut out the neckline first, then the shoulder and the armhole, before coming back to cut that vent open. It's really thin, by the way. The opening at the center back would be really thin. You do not want it to be too wide, hence why I really did not measure it all the way in. But if you want it to be wide, you can do anything from basically 0.5 inch would work, but I just made mine a very thin cut, and this is what our back plan is looking like. So let me just show you guys what the entire back plan is looking like, and you can see it's all nice and neat. So this is our back plan. Now we'll be moving over to the front plan for this garment, and when opened, this is what the center back looks like. You can see that that slit or that cut isn't so wide or so intense. It's still, it's there, but it still looks like it's closed, just so when you sew it, the reason it's so thin is because when you sew it, it tends to expand a little bit. So yes, now for the front, this is my basic block or my basic bodice pattern, and the neckline for this is 5 inches deep and 3 inches wide as well. So what we are going to do next is to figure out how deep we want that pink or that vent to be, the pink patch to be. So from the neckline there, from the neckline, I'm going to mark 2 inches, and I'm just going to take my pen and mark the 2 inch point. You can make it more, you can make it 3, you can make it 4, depending on how wide you want your patch fabric to be on the dress. But for me, 2 inches was just fine. Then from my shoulder line, I'm going to figure out how deep I want it to be. So I think I'll be working with 12 inches, because I do not want it to be too deep, because when you sew it tends to go a little bit deeper. So I'm just going to connect that 2 inch mark to that 12 inch mark, and I'll be doing it with a slant line because I want it to be in a V shape. You can make it curve, you can make it square, you can do any shape you want for this, but I want mine to be in a V shape. So that is why I'll be using a slant line to connect the points together. But if you want yours to be round, you can use a pattern master, or is it you can use a curve ruler to curve the tip or the edges and connect them, or you can make it square shape. Just do what you want, or go with your preference and your taste. Okay, so this is what it's looking like. So that is going to be the pink patch that we'll have on the top, and that is going to be my main fabric. So do note, I'll be cutting all pieces on fold. Basically, I'll be cutting the top part on fold, I'll be cutting that top part on fold, and I'll be cutting my main fabric on fold as well. So I am just going to cut this out, just so you get a better understanding of what we are doing. Okay, so while cutting out the pattern pieces, I would cut out the border line that I did add on the center front fold, because you don't want to add up excess fabric basically. So I'm just going to take that off, and while cutting it on the pink patch, I did add about half an inch on the sides there, half an inch along the neckline, and at the top I added 1 inch, and at the bottom as well I did add 1 inch. The reason for doing this is that when you tend to sew on pieces together, if you cut it the exact way as the pattern, it tends to be shorter. So it's always advisable to cut the fabric longer, a few inches longer, at least 1 inch longer, just so when you sew it on, you don't have it looking shorter. I mean, it's always better to have it looking longer so you can trim off the excess. So this is the bigger part which I'll be using to cut my main fabric in a bit. Now for this small pink patch, I did cut out 2 pieces because I'll be using one to turn the neckline. Basically, I'll be using one to turn the neckline over. I do not want a lining for this, hence why I cut out 2 pieces for that. Then for this big one, I'll be using a lining fabric, but for the smaller pink fabric, I'm not using any lining. That's why I cut out 2. So I'm going to cut this out on my main fabric as well, ensuring that I add 2 inches to the bust, the waist, the hip, basically the same way I did for the back. Now this is it on my main fabric. You can see I extended the bust, waist, and the hip by 2, and I just measured the length of the entire garment and placed it right sides. Then I added half an inch to the armhole and half an inch to this V cut that we have along the front. And my fabric is on fold, by the way, so I'm just going to cut it out. So you might be wondering, how did I measure the length of the fabric? So do know that I said my fabric length is 38, or I want my dress length to be 38. So I basically measure 38 inches from the shoulder down, then kind of figured out how to connect all those points together, even if the pattern tends to be shorter. Okay, so this is what the front plan is looking like at this point when placed side by side. You can see that the pink patch fabric is longer, and you'll be surprised to see how much of it would reduce when we actually sew it onto the main fabric. So what I'm going to do is to line my fabric first. I'm going to line the main fabrics of the front and the main fabrics of the back before attaching any of the pink patches to it. Okay, so I'm just going to take this aside first and line the front. But before I do that, let me just show you guys the measurement for the strap or the prints that will be along that V. So what I'm doing is to measure from top to bottom and from basically along the V line from one shoulder to the peak or the tip of that V and all the way to the other shoulder. And I have 26 inches, so I'm going to multiply. You can multiply this by 2 or 3 depending on how extra you want the ruffles or the prints to be, but I'm going to do by 2. And if measured by 2, it's about 56, I guess. Then I just decided to I ended up using 60 inches, by the way. So I'm going to cut out 60 inches of this fabric, a strap that is 3 inches wide and 60 inches long. Having done that, these are all the pieces laid side by side: my lining, my strap for the ruffles, my pink patch fabric. So I cut out 2 of this because I couldn't get a whole 60 straight. So I cut out 2 pieces that are 30 inches long. Okay, so I'm just going to use the lining for the back to turn over the hem, turn the sides, turn over the neckline, and that vent opening or that V cut or that V slit we made at the back. Then I'll repeat the same thing for the front. I'll use the lining pieces to turn over the sides and the hem, while I would stop stitch the front neckline and the armhole. So this is the back. You can see that I did turn the neckline over, and I added a little bit of button loop at the back just so I can use a button at that point to hold it down. Then for the front, I turned the sides and the hem, while I stop stitched the neckline because we'll be attaching that pink patch to the front neckline, and we really do not need to turn it over. Now for this piece, I'm going to place the 2 pieces right sides facing. Then I would sew round the neckline from end to end, turn it over, top stitch the sides and the shoulder before attaching it to this main fabric piece right here. So this is what the main fabric is looking like, and this is what our strap is looking like. Before attaching the other part or the patch that goes on the neckline, it's advisable to print this on first from end to end, just so it's nice and neat. And yes, basically, so what I'll be doing is to make tiny little pleats like this. So when pleating, I'm not starting up from the shoulder tip. I'm starting like 2 inches below the shoulder. So I'll start 2 inches below both shoulders basically and pleat from end to end. And you can see that this is what it's looking like. So why did I go 2 inches below the shoulder? Just so it gives me room to sew, and I don't tend to um hold in any pleats while I sew on the shoulders together. Next, we'll be joining this neckline to the main fabric, and to do this we're just going to turn it right sides like this and sew from top to bottom, and repeat the same thing on the other side while we turn it over. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew this down and show you guys what it looks like when it is sewn. You'll be surprised to see how small the allowance that we added to this pink patch was used, how much allowance was used basically. So this is it after it has been sewn. You can see it's all nice and tidy. I'm just going to overlock those sides together just so it's nice and clean. And I'm going to press this down just to relax all the seams. And I like how it's already going, and I like how it's already looking. So yes, this is what our front plan is looking like. for now. Then what I'll be doing next is to join the shoulder of the front to the shoulder of the back. Then I would attach the sides or join the sides together, then attach the sleeve, and that is basically it. So I'm just going to go overlock this first, join the shoulder, join the sides using my body measurements, and attach the sleeves. So for this garment, I did opt for a basic long sleeve, so it's nothing extra, just a long sleeve. And yeah, so I have it equal on both sides, and this is what it's looking like at this point. So next I'll be stitching on a button on this side of the back, just so we can button up that vent or close up that vent. So I'll be stitching this button here with my needle and thread. Then we'll basically wait and kind of close it in with a loop, just so it doesn't go, just to keep it the neckline in place basically. So yeah, that's basically it for this tutorial, you guys, and this is the final look. Do let me know your thoughts about this project in the comment section. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, comment, share with your friends and family, and yeah, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Like, subscribe. I cannot overemphasize how much that means to me. Just subscribe, please subscribe, join the family, and yeah, I'll see you guys in another video. Okay, bye.